Hey, what's up everybody? Jake here and welcome to the hobby. I did some research and I pulled together the top most graded Pokemon cards from PSA in 2023, and I think this will be super insightful for you guys to see what the most popular cards to get graded from this year was, and at the same time just show you the amount of quantity that's currently getting graded. We graded over 1 million Pokemon cards with PSA in 2023, which is absolutely bonkers because I can tell you there was not 1 million cards this year that was probably worth getting graded, but that just goes to show the amount of people that are currently interested in the hobby. So I think this would be pretty insightful. There's a couple of quick tidbits before we go over this list. All the cards on this list are specifically cards that came out in 2023. This is not the most graded cards out of all years. This is specifically cards from this year, just so you guys can have some additional insight on the most popular cards this year. However, with that being said, the cards that came out earlier on this year, the cards that came out from Crown Zenith, the cards that came out from Scarlet and Violet base, those cards are going to have a leg up on sets that just came out, like 151 and Shiny Treasure EX. Those sets are really good, but because they came out later in the year, they just have less cards that have already been graded. But we are going to talk about some of the cards that I think are going to make the biggest jump throughout the next couple of years. So this is going to be still a pretty insightful list overall. So first up on the list, we got ourselves the special secret rare Mewtwo from Japanese 151. This is ranked number 10 on the list with 8,679 copies of it already graded at PSA, considering that it's from the Japanese 151 set, which came out later this year, and it's already in the 10th place spot. I can tell you it's probably going to jump up a couple more spots throughout the next couple of years. Over 8,000 copies of it has been graded by PSA. Next up on the list in 9th place, we have ourselves the Erika's Invitation, also from Japanese 151. It is the most graded Japanese 151 card by far. The full art version is a little bit more graded than the secret rare alt art version, just simply because it's a little bit easier to pull the full art version. Both are really beautiful, and right now I kind of averaged it out, so this is where me fudging the numbers a little bit just because I didn't want Erika's Invitation to take up multiple spots. Right now the average number of Erika's Invitation from the Japanese 151 set that was graded is 8,880 cards, and surprisingly a very low percentage of them are getting PSA 10. Right around 55% of them are getting PSA 10, which is fairly low, which means if you submit an Erika's Invitation, half the time you're getting a 10. Usually you want to be at around 80 to 90%. This just simply means that people are grading this card regardless of the condition. If they have this card, people are simply throwing it to the grader because a 10 is so valuable, they don't even care. In 8th place, we have the Nagaba set. Once again, I'm kind of averaging the numbers right now. The average amount of these cards, because they're all unique, we have the Umbreon, Espeon, Glaceon, and all the other evolutions, and they all have their own unique number. But on average, over 9,000 of these cards individually have been graded through PSA, so that's a ton. The Umbreon is the most with around 13,000, and some of the other less important ones like Vaporeon and Glaceon, they have been graded right around 7,000 times. So on average, around 9,000 of them have been graded. So these are Japanese promo cards, and delightfully, they are probably some of the best Japanese promos to come out of this year. So not surprising to see them this high on the list. 90% of them get a PSA 10. This is completely normal with Japanese promo cards. They almost always get 10s. That just shows how good the quality in Japan really is. So not a surprise there that 9 out of 10 times you're getting a 10 with one of these Nagaba promos. In 7th place, this is really surprising to me, but in 7th place we have the Radiant Charizard from Crown Zenith. This has been graded a total of 10,996 times, with 57% of them being PSA 10. This is very surprising to me because this is one of those cards that I personally don't think is really worth getting graded unless you really want it. But here's the thing, two major portion. One is that it's Charizard, and that alone makes it grade worthy just because Charizard is kind of super easy to trade with, you know? If you get one of these Radiant Charizard inside of a mystery box, it's almost something that you're okay with. You almost shrug it off because it's a graded Charizard card. It can't be that bad. So that's why there are so many of these getting graded, even though personally for me, the Radiant Charizard is such an easy pull that it's not that big of a deal. You should probably just go with an ungraded copy at this point, unless you really want one. And there are a lot of people that want them because it's a graded Charizard. They are so easy to trade overall, but Radiant Charizard is probably the weakest card on this list that I would not actually consider grading. Next up, we have ourselves the Iono card from Clayburst, specifically the Iono from Clayburst. This is the Japanese Iono. This card has been graded a total of 12,804 times this year. Clayburst was one of the first set to come out from Scarlet and Violet. It was one of the very first expansion set, and it's currently in 6th place on this list. 57% of the Ionos are currently in a PSA 10, and this is an average of both the full art as well as the secret rare version. So really darn cool card, and the Japanese love their full art trainer card, so that doesn't surprise me at all. In 5th place, we have ourselves another full art trainer card, and it's the last one on this list, but it's no surprise either. We have ourselves the Miriam from Scarlet and Violet Japanese base. Both the alt art version and full art version are really heavily graded, with around 48% of them getting a PSA 10. We have around 13,362 copies of these graded Miriams floating around. Japanese Scarlet and Violet 151 was one of the first set to come out of this year, so it doesn't surprise me that the Miriam is so high, but most likely the Erika's invitation over the next couple of months to a year or two is probably going to overtake both the Iono and the Miriam, most likely, just because Japanese 151 is super duper popular, and it just hasn't had enough time to catch up to these older sets yet. But like I said, that's the last full art trainer card on the list, because in 4th place, we have one of the most recent releases of this year, and it's already in 4th place, and that is the Great Felt Hat Pikachu. Currently, there are 13,669 copies of this card graded, with a 50% chance of it being PSA 10. That doesn't surprise me. It's practically a coin flip if you get one of these in a 10. I had 4 copies of this card. I initially had 4 copies. I currently only have 1 copy of it. And of the 4 copies that I have, I think only 1 was PSA 10 worthy. So I kept that one, and I already traded the other 3. If you watch some other videos, you might know what I traded for my Great Felt Hat cards, but I'm pretty happy with the trade overall. And yeah, really surprising to this one. I knew that there were a ton of Great Felt Hat Pikachu cards out there. I knew I had inside sources from the Pokemon company that told me that they had thousands and thousands and thousands of copies of Great Felt Hat Pikachu. But here's the thing, they just simply did not print enough. There was just so much demand for this card that even though they had 50,000, 60,000 ungraded copies ready to hand out, they sold out immediately. That's how popular this card really is. So absolutely insane, absolutely bonkers, but it's not that rare. There's 13,000 graded copies right now, and there's going to be more. It'll probably reach over 20 to 30,000 graded copies at PSA over the next year or two. So if you really want this card, be patient. They're still distributing it from the Netherlands Museum. There's going to be another wave of these being distributed. So there are going to be more copies out there, so don't freak out. This card is one of those cards that it's going to be readily available for years to come. It's going to be desirable, but readily available, really. All right, making it onto the podium, we have ourselves the Pikachu from 151. This is incredibly high for it. There are 14,084 copies of it graded at PSA, with an 83% chance of it being a PSA 10. That is absolutely insane, and I think that's super cool. Personally, I did not have this card on my top 10 best cards of 2023 list, and I put a lot of thought into it. It probably should have been on the list. I just didn't want to overwhelm my top 10 cards from 2023 with a bunch of Pikachu, because if it was up to me, probably more than half the list would be Pikachu cards, and I just didn't want that to happen. But it's a super cool card, and it's really well deserving of a spot on this list. Over 14,000 copies graded. English 151 hasn't been around for that long, so I think even more copies of it will be graded over the next couple of months. 20, 30,000 copies is very, very easily for it to reach. In second place, we have ourselves another Pikachu card, and that is the Secret Rare Pikachu from Crown Zenith, which was on my top 10 best cards of 2023 list. And this is 14,443 copies of it graded, with only a 59% chance of it being a PSA 10, one of the lowest percentage on this list, and that doesn't surprise me. Cards on Crown Zenith are in general just harder to grade because I don't know why. Crown Zenith's print quality was just abysmal. It was super hard to get anything PSA 10. I looked at, 50, 60 hits from Crown Zenith, and realistically, I saw maybe 10 cards that were probably 10 worthy. Most of the cards had whitening on the back, centering issues, dings, dents, you name it. I saw issues with just about every single card, so it was pretty disheartening because there were a ton of really cool cards from Crown Zenith, but it's really challenging to get these cards in 10s, so that doesn't surprise me, Secret Rare Pikachu being this high on the list. And in first place, we have the best card of 2023 without a doubt, and that is the Magikarp, the Japanese Magikarp from Triple Beat. This card has 18,424 copies graded. That is an insane amount of copies of this card graded, and they are still highly, highly desirable. This is one of the most hot and desirable card from 2023, and it's a Magikarp card. Just goes to show you that Pokemon is really not a complete popularity contest. It's truly about appreciating the art, and this card's art is absolutely bonkers. I absolutely agree. It's one of the best artwork to come out of the Pokemon company in years. It's a super cool card, legendary status, honestly, and really high chance of getting a 10. With Triple Beat being one of the Japanese set, it has a 93% chance of being PSA 10, which means if you pull one of this card inside of your Japanese Triple Beat booster box, you are pretty much guaranteed to have a 10 in your hand, which is super duper cool. But over 18,000 copies of it graded, which means it's going to be readily available. You're going to see hundreds of listings on eBay, but because of how highly desirable this card is, it still carries a significant value. It is not a cheap card to get, but if there's any card to get from 2023, it's probably going to be this Magikarp, because you can give it to your kids, tell them the story about it, and they'll enjoy it for the next 20 years. It's an art card. It's worthy on display. So that's been the top 10 cards from 2023, specifically cards that came out this year, because there are other Pokemon cards that were graded way more than this, but in general, I think we're going to see a lot more 151 cards jumping onto the list. In fact, I think most of this list in the next year or two for 2023 is going to be all 151 cards. Cards like the Charizard, the Mew, maybe some cards from Shiny Treasure. Those cards will definitely jump on this list. But in general, I think the Magikarp might keep its first place for the rest of time. So really cool list. Hope this has been insightful. Let me know what your thoughts are, and I'll see you guys next time.